My son went to the bathroom at the restaurant. Then the waiter said, "He put something in your juice." The waiter's hand was shaking when he leaned close to my ear. His voice came out in a barely audible whisper, words that would change everything. "Mom, please don't drink that. He put something in your juice while you were looking at the menu." I stared at the glass of cranberry juice sitting in front of me. Condensation beading on the sides, ice cubes slowly melting. The same glass my son Marcus had been sitting across from just moments before he excused himself to the bathroom. My hand froze halfway to the glass. The restaurant noise, the clinking silverware, the murmur of conversations, the soft jazz playing overhead, all of it faded into a distant hum. "What did you say?" I whispered back, not quite believing what I'd heard. The young waiter's eyes darted toward the restroom hallway. "I saw him. I was coming to refill water and I saw him take something from his pocket and put it in your drink. I don't know what it was, but it didn't look right. I couldn't just stand there and—" His voice cracked. "Please, ma'am, don't drink it." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This couldn't be happening. Not Marcus, not my son. But as I sat there, the glass between us like a piece of evidence in a crime I couldn't process, pieces started clicking into place. Pieces I'd been ignoring for months. Let me back up because you need to understand who Marcus was to me, or who I thought he was. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 72 years old, a widow of 6 years, and until 3 minutes ago, I believed I had raised a good man. Marcus is my only child. His father, Robert, passed away after a heart attack in 2019, leaving me our home in Pasadena, a 4-bedroom Craftsman we bought in 1978 for what now seems like pocket change, along with his pension, savings, and a life insurance policy that set me up comfortably for my remaining years. Robert and I had worked hard our entire lives. He was a civil engineer. I taught elementary school for 33 years. We lived modestly, saved diligently, and when Robert died, I was grateful he'd been so careful about our future. The house alone was worth well over $1 million now. The neighborhood had changed, young families moving in, tech workers renovating the old Victorians. I'd been approached more than once by developers wanting to buy. I'd always told them no. This was my home, the place where Marcus took his first steps, where we hosted Christmas dinners, where Robert planted the jacaranda tree in the backyard that now towered over the fence. Marcus had seemed supportive of my decision to stay. At least that's what he said. He was 46, worked in medical equipment sales, divorced 3 years ago from a woman named Jennifer, who I'd actually liked quite a bit. They'd had no children, which Marcus claimed was mutual, though Jennifer once told me over wine that he'd kept putting it off. After the divorce, he'd moved into a condo in Glendale, which he complained about constantly. The noise, the HOA fees, the size. "Nothing like your place, Mom," he'd say whenever he visited. "You're so lucky to have all that space." The first time money came up directly was about 8 months ago. We'd been having coffee in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Robert used to make pancakes every Sunday, and Marcus had casually mentioned that he was having some cash flow problems. "Nothing serious," he'd assured me, stirring his coffee without looking up. "Just some investments that didn't pan out the way I expected. The divorce wiped me out more than I thought it would." I'd offered to help. What mother wouldn't? But he'd waved me off. No, I'll figure it out. I always do." Then, after a pause, "Have you thought about what you want to do with the house, though? Long term, I mean. It's a lot for you to manage alone." I'd told him the same thing I told the developers. This was my home. I wasn't going anywhere. He'd nodded, smiled, said he understood completely. But something in his eyes had flickered. Something I chose not to see. The visits became more frequent after that. Every week, sometimes twice a week, he'd stop by with takeout or groceries, help me with yard work I didn't really need help with, fix things that weren't quite broken. He was attentive in a way he hadn't been since he was a boy, trying to impress his father. "You don't have to come so often," I'd tell him. "I know you're busy. I want to, Mom. You're my priority now." He'd hug me, and I'd feel grateful, blessed even. How many elderly people could say their adult children cared this much? But there were moments, small moments that didn't quite fit. Like the time I caught him in Robert's study, going through the filing cabinet. He'd said he was looking for old family photos. I'd believed him, even though the photos were in albums in the living room, and the filing cabinet held financial documents, deeds, insurance papers. Or the time he asked me, seemingly out of nowhere, if I'd updated my will recently. "Not since your father died," I told him. "Why?" "Just thinking you should make sure everything's in order. You know how complicated estates can get. I could go with you to see a lawyer if you want. Make sure everything's set up right." I'd thanked him, but said I'd handle it myself. His jaw had tightened just slightly before he smiled again. "Of course, just trying to help." Then there were the medications. I take several: blood pressure, cholesterol, a baby aspirin, calcium supplements. Nothing unusual for someone my age, but about 3 months ago I started feeling off. Dizzy spells, fatigue that felt different from normal tiredness, confusion that would come and go. I mentioned it to my doctor during a routine visit. She ran tests. Everything came back normal. Sometimes these things happen with age, she'd said gently. But if it continues, we'll dig deeper. It did continue, but it was inconsistent. Some days I felt fine. Other days I could barely get out of bed. I started keeping a journal to track the symptoms, trying to find a pattern. Looking back now, the bad days were almost always days when Marcus had visited, days when he'd made me tea, or brought me lunch, or filled my water glass. I'd never connected it. Why would I? You don't suspect your own child of poisoning you slowly. That's not how a mother's mind works. We make excuses, find alternative explanations, blame ourselves before we'd ever blame them. But the evidence had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. 2 weeks ago, Marcus had asked me again about the house. We were sitting in the backyard under Robert's jacaranda tree, and he'd brought wine. I'd had 1 glass. Maybe 2. Mom, I've been thinking, this house is getting to be too much for you. What if you fell? What if something happened and no one was here? I have my alert button, I'd reminded him, and Mrs. Chen next door checks on me. That's not enough. You should think about moving somewhere with support. Assisted living, maybe. Somewhere nice where you'd have people around, activities, medical staff on site. I don't need assisted living, Marcus. I'm perfectly capable. His expression had hardened then, just for a second. Are you, though? You've been forgetting things, getting confused. Maybe you don't realize how bad it's gotten. I'd felt a chill despite the warm California evening. I'm fine. I'm just worried about you. His voice had softened again, but something in it felt rehearsed. If anything happened to you, I'd never forgive myself. Maybe we should at least get the house appraised. See what it's worth. That way you'd know your options. I know what it's worth, Marcus, and I'm not selling. He'd left shortly after that, kissing my forehead at the door. I love you, Mom. I just want what's best for you. I'd watched him drive away in his BMW, the same BMW he'd complained he could barely afford the payments on, and for the first time, I'd felt something close to fear, which brings me to tonight. Marcus had called yesterday to invite me to dinner. There's this great new place in Old Town, he'd said. My treat. We haven't had a nice dinner out in ages. I'd been surprised, but pleased. Maybe I'd been reading too much into things. Maybe he really was just a concerned son. The restaurant was lovely. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, farm-to-table menu. Marcus had been charming all through appetizers, asking about my week, telling funny stories about difficult clients. He'd ordered for both of us, including my cranberry juice. You always get cranberry juice at restaurants, he'd said with a smile. I remember. I'd felt touched. See, I'd thought, he does care. You've been paranoid for nothing. Then he'd excused himself to the bathroom. The waiter had brought our entrees, and I'd been looking at the menu considering dessert when I'd felt a presence beside me and heard those whispered words. He put something in your juice. Now Marcus was walking back toward the table, weaving between other diners, that same pleasant smile on his face. In the warm light of the restaurant, he looked so much like his father. Same square jaw, same deep-set eyes. Robert would have been devastated if he could see this moment. Our eyes met across the room. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly. Everything okay? I had maybe 30 seconds before he reached the table. 30 seconds to decide what to do with the information that had just shattered my entire world. The waiter had stepped back, but I could feel him nearby, pretending to arrange silverware at an empty table. Watching. Marcus slid into his seat across from me. Sorry about that. What did I miss? I looked at my son, really looked at him. And for the first time, I let myself see what had been hiding behind that familiar face. Nothing, I heard myself say. Nothing at all. He glanced at my untouched juice glass, then back at me. You haven't touched your drink. Something wrong with it? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning neither of us was ready to acknowledge. I reached for the glass, my hand steady despite the chaos in my chest. Marcus leaned forward slightly, watching, waiting. And in that moment, I understood exactly what he'd been hoping for. My fingers wrapped around the cold glass. Marcus's eyes followed the movement. A flicker of something. Anticipation? Relief crossing his face. I lifted the glass slowly, bringing it toward my lips. Then I tilted it sharply to the side. The cranberry juice spilled across the white tablecloth in a dark crimson stain, ice cubes scattering across the surface. Some of the liquid splashed onto Marcus's shirt. Oh my God! I gasped, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. I'm so clumsy, Marcus, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, his face went completely blank. Not surprised, not concerned. Blank, like a mask had slipped. Then, the concerned son expression snapped back into place. It's okay, Mom, don't worry about it. But his voice was tight, controlled. The waiter was beside us instantly, the same young man who'd warned me. "Let me get that cleaned up for you folks, and I'll bring you a fresh juice, ma'am." "No!" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Both Marcus and the waiter looked at me. I forced a laugh, touched my chest. "I mean, no thank you. I think I've had enough excitement for one evening. Just water, please." "Of course." The waiter began sopping up the spill with napkins, and I saw him carefully collect the glass with the remaining liquid, handling it by the base. Our eyes met briefly. He understood. Marcus was dabbing at his shirt with his napkin, jaw clenched. "We should probably just get the check. You seem tired, Mum." "Actually, I'm feeling much better now." I smiled at him, and I let him see something new in that smile, something that made him pause. "But you're right. Let's go." He signaled for the check, paid quickly. Cash, I noticed, not a credit card that would leave a record, and we walked out into the cool Pasadena evening. The street was busy with Friday night crowds, people laughing, living their normal lives. I wondered how many of them had ever looked at their own child and seen a stranger. "I'll walk you to your car," Marcus said, his hand on my elbow. The gesture that had always felt protective now felt controlling. "That's all right. I'm parked just there." I pointed to my Camry under a streetlight, strategically parked in a well-lit area. I'd learned that habit from Robert years ago. Always park where people can see you. "Mum," Marcus's grip tightened slightly. "We should talk." "About what, honey?" His eyes searched my face. "You spilled that drink on purpose." "Don't be silly. I'm just clumsy sometimes. You know that." "The waiter said something to you. I saw him." My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. "He was just asking if we needed anything else." "Marcus, what's this about?" We stood there on the sidewalk, the Friday evening crowd flowing around us like water around stones. Marcus's hand was still on my arm. His face was inches from mine. How much did he see? His voice was barely audible, and there it was, the admission I'd been both dreading and needing. "See what, Marcus?" I kept my voice level, my gaze steady on his face, the face I'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times, the face that had lit up on Christmas mornings, the face that had cried at his father's funeral. His expression hardened. "You know what?" A group of college students passed us, laughing loudly. Marcus stepped back, his hand dropping from my arm. He looked around, suddenly aware of the exposure, the witnesses. "I think we both know what's happening here, Mom. You're getting confused, paranoid. Earlier you were looking at me like I was a stranger. This is exactly what I've been worried about. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that if I hadn't known better, I might have believed him myself." "You're right," I said softly. "I have been confused lately, dizzy, tired, forgetful." I watched his face carefully. "Funny thing is, it always seems worse after you visit." His jaw twitched. "That's a terrible thing to say." "Is it?" I took a step backward toward my car. "Tell me, Marcus, what was in that glass?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The waiter saw you put something in my drink." He's mistaken, or lying, probably looking for a bigger tip, but sweat had appeared on his forehead despite the cool evening. Maybe, or maybe the police can tell us for sure. The waiter saved the glass. Evidence. I was bluffing. I had no idea if the waiter had actually kept it, but Marcus's face went pale. "Are you going to call the police on your own son over a misunderstanding?" "Is it a misunderstanding, Marcus?" The silence stretched between us. In it, I could hear everything we were both not saying. The house, the inheritance, the slow poisoning over months, the final attempt tonight that should have worked would have worked, if not for an observant waiter. "You ungrateful," he caught himself, but not before I saw the rage flash across his face. "The real Marcus. After everything I've done for you, all those visits, all that time, you mean all those opportunities," my voice was shaking now, "to put something in my tea, my food, my medication? You're insane." "Am I? Or am I the one thing standing between you and $1 million house?" His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist hard. "You don't know what you're talking about. Let go of me." My voice was loud enough that people turned. A couple across the street stopped walking. Marcus released me immediately, his face flushing. "Mom, please, you're making a scene. Let me take you home. We can talk about this rationally." "I'm not getting in a car with you." "Then how are you getting home? You're clearly not well enough to drive." He was right about that. My hands were shaking, my legs felt weak, but I'd rather walk the 5 miles home than get into a vehicle with the man who just tried to poison me. "Everything okay here?" A deep voice behind me. I turned to see a police officer, young, African-American, concerned expression. He must have been on foot patrol. "Officer, thank God." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I need to report an attempted poisoning." Marcus's face went from pale to gray. "Officer, my mother is elderly and confused. She gets mixed up sometimes. I was just trying to take her home." "Is that true, ma'am? Are you confused?" I looked at the officer, at his name tag, J. Morrison, and at the genuine concern in his young face. "No, Officer Morrison, I'm 72 years old. I'm in complete possession of my faculties, and approximately 20 minutes ago, My son put something in my drink at Harvest Moon restaurant. The waiter witnessed it and may have kept the glass as evidence. Officer Morrison's expression shifted, became more alert. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. I'm aware. I'd like to file a formal report and have the substance tested. Mum, please, Marcus started. Sir, I need you to step back. Officer Morrison moved slightly between us. He spoke into his radio, requesting backup and asking someone to secure evidence at Harvest Moon. Then he turned back to me. Ma'am, let's start from the beginning. What exactly happened tonight? I told him. All of it. The dinner invitation, the bathroom break, the waiter's warning, the spilled drink, Marcus's reaction. As I spoke, Marcus stood there with his arms crossed, shaking his head, occasionally interjecting with, "That's not true," or "She's confused." A second officer arrived, then a third. Someone was sent to the restaurant. Statements were taken. Marcus, realizing this wasn't going to go away, called a lawyer. I refused Marcus's lawyer's suggestion that we all go home and sort this out privately. There's nothing to sort out privately, I said firmly. Either there was something in that glass or there wasn't. Let the evidence decide. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the Pasadena Police Department in a surprisingly comfortable chair in a victim services room. A female detective in her 50s, Detective Sarah Chen, sat across from me with a notepad. Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to know we're taking this very seriously. The restaurant staff confirmed they have the glass, and it's been sent to the lab for analysis. Results usually take a few days, but given the nature of the allegation, we've marked it urgent. Thank you. The waiter, Jeremy Paulson, gave a statement. He said he clearly saw your son take a small packet from his pocket and empty it into your drink while you were looking at the menu. He said something about it didn't sit right with him, so he warned you. I felt tears prick my eyes. A stranger had saved my life. A 20-something waiter I'd never met had cared more about my safety than my own son. I'd like to call someone to come get you, Detective Chen continued. Is there a friend or family member? My neighbor, Mrs. Chen. No relation, I added, with a weak smile. Helen Chen. She has a key to my house. We'll call her. In the meantime, I need to ask you some difficult questions. You mentioned you've been feeling ill for several months. Dizzy, confused, fatigued. Can you tell me more about that? I walked her through it, the symptoms, the pattern, the visits from Marcus. The more I talked, the more Detective Chen's expression darkened. Mrs. Whitmore, if what you're suggesting is true, that your son has been poisoning you slowly over an extended period, this is attempted murder, not just what happened tonight, but a sustained pattern of harm. The words hung in the air. Attempted murder. My son, my baby boy. I know, I whispered. We'll need medical records, medication logs if you have them, any supplements or vitamins he may have given you. We'll need to search your home for evidence. Of course, whatever you need. Helen Chen, the neighbor version, arrived 40 minutes later, her face creased with worry. She'd known me and Robert for 15 years, had brought casseroles after his funeral, checked on me weekly. Eleanor, my God, I came as soon as they called. What's happened? I couldn't say it out loud again. Not yet. Detective Chen explained while I sat there numb. Helen's face went through several emotions. Shock, disbelief, horror, and finally, anger. That son of yours, I never trusted him. Always too interested in your business. Robert wouldn't have stood for it. She was right. Robert would have seen through Marcus years ago. But Robert was gone, and I'd been alone, wanting so badly to believe my son loved me. Can I take her home? Helen asked Detective Chen. Yes, but officers will need to come by tomorrow to document her home, collect evidence. In the meantime, Mrs. Whitmore, if you have any documentation, wills, property deeds, insurance policies, I'd secure those somewhere safe, somewhere your son doesn't have access to. I nodded. Of course, the documents, the proof of what he'd been after all along. Helen drove me home in her ancient Volvo, her hand occasionally reaching over to pat mine. My house looked the same as always, the porch light on, the jacaranda tree's shadow stretching across the lawn, but everything had changed. Inside, Helen made me tea while I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had sat hundreds of times, where he'd done homework as a child, where he'd told me about his engagement to Jennifer, where he'd probably planned exactly how to kill me. I'm staying tonight, Helen announced. Don't even argue. I'm sleeping in your guest room and that's final. I didn't argue. I was grateful. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mom, please let me explain. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. I showed it to Helen. She snorted. Don't you dare respond. That's for the police to see. She was right. I forwarded it to Detective Chen's email, then blocked the number. Another text came through from a different number. You're making a huge mistake. When this is proven wrong, everyone will know you're senile. I'll have you declared incompetent. The threat was clear. Even if the poison wasn't found, he'd find another way to take everything from me. I forwarded that one too, then blocked it. Helen watched me, her face grim. He's going to fight this, isn't he? Yes, I said, but so am I. We sat there in my kitchen, 2 elderly women refusing to be victims, and waited for the dawn and whatever evidence it would bring. The call came at 9:30 the next morning. I'd barely slept, lying awake in my bed listening to every creak of the house, jumping at shadows. Helen had checked on me twice during the night, bringing water, offering quiet company. Detective Chen's voice on the phone was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Whitmore, we have preliminary results from the lab. Can I come by this morning? I'd like to discuss them in person." My hand tightened on the phone. "Just tell me, was there something in the glass?" A pause, then, "Yes, ma'am, there was. Temazepam. It's a benzodiazepine commonly prescribed for insomnia. The amount in your drink was approximately 10 times the normal therapeutic dose. Combined with your age and medications, it could have caused respiratory depression, coma, or death." The room tilted. Helen grabbed my arm, steadying me as I sank into a kitchen chair. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you there?" "I'm here." My voice sounded distant, hollow. "So it's real, it's not in my head." "No, ma'am, it's very real. We've obtained a warrant to search your home for additional evidence, and we've issued a warrant for your son's arrest. Officers are en route to his residence now." Helen made coffee while I tried to process what Detective Chen had told me. Temazepam, a sleeping pill, the same medication I'd been prescribed years ago after Robert died, when grief kept me awake at night. I'd stopped taking it after a few months, but the bottle was probably still in my medicine cabinet. Marcus would have known that. He'd helped me organize medications after his father's death. 2 officers arrived at 10 o'clock, along with Detective Chen and a crime scene technician. I walked them through my home, pointing out everywhere Marcus had spent time, every place he might have tampered with something. They photographed everything, bagged my vitamin bottles, my blood pressure medication, the tea bags in my pantry, the water filter on my refrigerator. They swabbed surfaces in the kitchen. They went through Robert's old study, the filing cabinet Marcus had been caught searching. "Mrs. Whitmore," Detective Chen called from the study. "Can you come here, please?" I found her standing at Robert's desk, holding a folder I'd never seen before. Manila, unmarked, stuck in the back of a drawer. "Is this yours?" she asked. "I've never seen it." She opened it carefully using gloved hands. Inside were printouts, articles about inheritance laws in California, information about challenging mental competency, a list of memory care facilities in the area with costs highlighted, and something that made my blood run cold, a printout about medications that could mimic dementia symptoms. Benzodiazepines, anticholinergics, certain supplements in high doses. Detective Chen read aloud. "All things that could cause confusion, memory problems, dizziness in elderly patients." She looked at me. "Your son has been researching how to make you appear incompetent." There was more. At the bottom of the folder, a handwritten note in Marcus's distinctive scrawl. "Dr. Morrison, evaluation for assisted living placement. Mom's symptoms worsening. Forgetful, confused, unsafe living alone. Recommend full cognitive assessment." He was building a case, I whispered. He was going to have me declared incompetent and force me into a facility. "It appears so. If the poisoning tonight hadn't worked, he had a backup plan. Get you declared unable to care for yourself, take control of your assets as your guardian, and..." Detective Chen didn't finish, but she didn't have to. "And then he could continue poisoning me in a care facility where my decline would seem natural, where my death would surprise no one." The crime scene tech called out from my bathroom. "We found him holding my daily vitamin container, one of those plastic organizers with compartments for each day of the week. I'd been using it religiously, filling it every Sunday. I'd like to test these," he said, "particularly if she's been feeling ill on specific days." I thought about my journal, the pattern I'd been trying to find. The symptoms were worse midweek usually. Wednesday, Thursday. Helen, who'd been hovering in the doorway, spoke up. "Marcus visited you every Wednesday." "I remember because it's the same day my grandson has soccer practice. I'd see his car when I got home." The tech carefully removed the pills from the Wednesday and Thursday compartments, placing them in evidence bags. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, putting it on speaker at Detective Chen's gesture. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is David Brenner. I'm Marcus Whitmore's attorney. My client would like to resolve this matter amicably. He's very concerned about your well-being and believes this situation has arisen from a misunderstanding, combined with your declining mental state." Detective Chen's eyebrows rose. I felt anger surge through me, cutting through the shock and grief. "Mr. Brenner," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "there's no misunderstanding. Your client attempted to poison me. The evidence has been confirmed by the police laboratory. Mrs. Whitmore, my client maintains his innocence. He suggests that you may have accidentally taken too much of your own medication and in your confusion misremembered events. He's willing to help you get the care you need. The care I need," my voice rose, "the only thing I need is for your client to face the consequences of attempted murder. That's a very serious accusation, one that will require substantial proof. My client is prepared to demonstrate that your cognitive decline. Detective Chen took the phone from my hand. Mr. Brenner, this is Detective Sarah Chen, Pasadena Police Department. You can save your arguments for court. We have physical evidence, witness testimony, and documentation of premeditation. Your client is currently being taken into custody. If you'd like to meet him at the station for booking, I suggest you head there now. She ended the call and handed my phone back. He's going to fight this hard, Mrs. Whitmore. You need to be prepared for that. I am, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. My phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor 3 doors down, Margaret Walsh. Eleanor, there are police cars at a house down the street. Everything okay? The neighborhood watch was efficient as ever. By noon, news would be all over the block. Helen answered for me while I watched the crime scene technicians work. They found more in my pantry, a container of protein powder I'd been adding to morning smoothies. Marcus had given it to me 2 months ago, said it would help keep my strength up. We'll test this too, the tech said, bagging it. By early afternoon, they'd finished. My home felt violated, despite their careful professionalism. Evidence bags covered my dining room table, medications, supplements, food items, documents, the physical proof of my son's betrayal. Detective Chen sat with me at that table, Helen beside me, and walked through what would happen next. Marcus was arrested at his condo at approximately 10:15 this morning. He's being held on charges of attempted murder and elder abuse. Bail will be set at his arraignment, likely Monday. Given the severity and the evidence, I expect it to be high. Will he make bail? I asked. That depends on his resources. Does he have access to significant funds? I thought about the condo, the BMW, the complaints about money. I don't think so. His divorce depleted his savings. He mentioned bad investments. Then he'll likely remain in custody until trial, unless someone posts bail for him. Helen made a disgusted sound. Who would do that? Everyone's going to know what he did. Detective Chen continued. The district attorney's office will be in touch. They'll want to go over your testimony, prepare you for what's ahead. This won't be easy, Mrs. Whitmore. Defense attorneys in cases like this often try to undermine the victim's credibility, especially when the victim is elderly. I understand. There's something else. Detective Chen pulled out another evidence bag, this one containing a phone. We obtained a warrant for your son's cell phone records and his laptop. The preliminary search found some disturbing material. Text messages with someone. We're still identifying the recipient, discussing your health, your assets, timeline projections. Timeline projections? How long it would take for certain symptoms to appear? How long before you'd be declared incompetent? How long? She paused. How long you'd likely survive with various interventions? The words hit me like physical blows. Marcus hadn't just been impatient. He'd been calculating, planning, measuring my life in weeks and months, weighing options like a business decision. Who was he texting? Helen asked. We're not sure yet. The number belongs to a burner phone, but we're working on it. The messages suggest Marcus wasn't working alone, a collaborator. Someone else who knew what he was doing, maybe even helped plan it. My mind raced through possibilities. Jennifer, his ex-wife. No, she'd seemed genuinely kind. A friend, a co-worker. There's one more thing, Detective Chen said, her voice gentle. In his apartment, we found a life insurance policy, on you, taken out 6 months ago. Marcus is listed as the beneficiary. The room went silent except for the ticking of Robert's grandfather clock in the hallway. How much? I heard myself ask. $500,000. Helen's hand found mine, squeezed tight. $500,000 plus the house, plus Robert's remaining pension and savings. Over $2 million total. That's what my life was worth to my son. That's what he'd been willing to kill me for. I never signed any life insurance policy, I said. We don't think you did. The signature appears to be forged. That's insurance fraud on top of everything else. I thought about Marcus as a little boy, bringing me dandelions from the yard. Marcus at 8, crying when he fell off his bike, and I patched his scraped knee. Marcus at 16, sullen and withdrawn after a fight with his father. Marcus at 25, standing proud in his first suit for his first real job. When had that person disappeared? When had my son become someone capable of this? Mrs. Whitmore? Detective Chen's voice pulled me back. Are you okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. After they left, Helen and I sat in the kitchen again. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, highlighting dust motes in the air. Everything looked normal, but nothing was. You should come stay with me, Helen said, just for a while, until this settles. I almost said yes. The house felt haunted now, every room full of memories I couldn't trust anymore. But then I looked around at the kitchen where I'd raised my son, at the photo of Robert on the mantel, at the life I'd built here. No, I said firmly. This is my home. He doesn't get to take that from me too. Helen nodded, understanding. Then I'm staying here, guest room, until he's convicted and locked away where he belongs. My phone buzzed. A text from the district attorney's office asking me to come in Monday morning to discuss the case. Another text, this one from Margaret Walsh. I heard. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. If you need anything at all, please call. Word was spreading. By tomorrow everyone would know. The whispers, the pitying looks, the awkward encounters at the grocery store. Poor Eleanor Whitmore, whose son tried to kill her. But you know what? Let them talk. I was alive. I was clear-headed, more clear-headed than I'd been in months, now that whatever Marcus had been giving me was out of my system, and I was angry, not just hurt or betrayed, angry. He'd counted on me being weak, being confused, being too trusting to see what was right in front of me. He'd counted on a mother's love making me blind. He'd miscalculated. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No dizziness, no confusion, no unexplained fatigue, just the deep sleep of someone who finally understood what had been wrong. And when I woke up Sunday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I went to Robert's closet, found the box I'd kept from his office, and pulled out his old business cards. Robert Whitmore, civil engineer. Underneath his name, a quote he'd always loved. The truth always has weight. Lies eventually collapse under their own. I put the card in my pocket and went downstairs to make breakfast. Marcus's lies were about to collapse, and I was going to make sure I was there to watch. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of preparation, of going over my testimony with the assistant district attorney, a sharp woman in her 40s named Catherine Reeves. 3 weeks of sleepless nights despite the absence of poison in my system. 3 weeks of neighbors avoiding eye contact, and friends I'd known for years, suddenly too busy to call. But not everyone abandoned me. Helen stayed true to her word. Margaret Walsh organized a meal train. My former teaching colleagues sent cards, and Jeremy Paulson, the waiter who'd saved my life, called to check on me twice. I just wanted you to know I'm ready to testify, he said during the second call. Whatever you need, what he did, what he tried to do, that's not okay. Thank you, Jeremy. You saved my life. I just did what anyone should do, he said quietly. I have a grandmother. I'd want someone to look out for her too. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A navy blue suit Robert had always liked. Pearl earrings, minimal makeup. I wanted to look competent, composed, nothing like the confused elderly woman Marcus's lawyer would try to paint me as. Helen drove me to the courthouse. My hands were shaking as we walked through the metal detectors, past reporters who'd gotten wind of the case, Pasadena's son accused of poisoning mother, and into the courtroom. And there he was. Marcus sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking thinner than I remembered. He'd been denied bail. The judge had called him a flight risk with clear motive and means. When he saw me enter, something flickered across his face. Not remorse, not love. Something harder to define. Resentment, maybe, or calculation. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I didn't look away. Neither did he. The hearing began with procedural matters. Then Catherine Reeves stood to present the state's evidence. She was methodical, devastating. The lab results showing temazepam in the glass. Jeremy Paulson's eyewitness testimony delivered with quiet certainty that made even the defense attorney's aggressive cross-examination fall flat. I know what I saw, Jeremy said firmly. He took something from his pocket, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and put it in her drink. Then he went to the bathroom. When I saw her reaching for that glass, I couldn't just stand there. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression, nodded slowly. Then came the evidence from my home, the vitamins laced with additional sedatives, the protein powder containing substances that could cause confusion and memory loss, my medication bottles, several of which had been tampered with, pills replaced with lookalikes containing different compounds. Your Honor, Catherine said, this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a sustained, calculated campaign of poisoning spanning at least 6 months, with the goal of either killing Mrs. Whitmore outright or rendering her mentally incompetent so the defendant could take control of her assets. She presented the folder from Robert's study, the research on dementia-mimicking drugs, the list of care facilities, the forged life insurance policy. The defendant stood to inherit over $2 million in property and assets, plus an additional $500,000 from a fraudulent life insurance policy. He was deeply in debt. Credit card statements show he owed over $80,000. His condo was in pre-foreclosure. He needed his mother's money and he was willing to kill her to get it. Marcus's lawyer, David Brenner, stood for the defense. He was polished, expensive-looking, probably costing Marcus what little money he had left. Your Honor, the state's narrative is compelling, but circumstantial. My client maintains his innocence. Mrs. Whitmore is 72 years old, on multiple medications, and has been experiencing documented cognitive decline. It's entirely possible she inadvertently took too much of her own medication and, in her confusion, misremembered events. The so-called evidence from her home could easily have been contaminated during normal use. As for the life insurance policy, my client denies any knowledge of it and suggests it may have been taken out by Mrs. Whitmore herself and forgotten. I felt Helen stiffen beside me. The audacity of it, suggesting I'd forged my own signature on a policy I didn't remember. Additionally, Brenner continued, we have evidence of Mrs. Whitmore's declining state. Neighbors report seeing her confused about which day of the week it was. Her doctor noted memory concerns. My client was simply trying to ensure his mother received appropriate care. Catherine stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore to the stand. My legs felt weak as I walked forward, but I kept my head high. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the witness box. Catherine led me through my testimony gently. My marriage to Robert, Marcus's childhood, the changes after Robert's death, Marcus's increasing financial problems and visits, the symptoms that worsened after his visits, the dinner at Harvest Moon, the waiter's warning, the spilled drink, Marcus's reaction. Mrs. Whitmore, Catherine said, did you ever give your son permission to alter your medications or supplements? No. Never. Did you sign a life insurance policy 6 months ago, naming Marcus as beneficiary? No. I never saw that document until the police showed it to me. Since your son's arrest and the removal of the substances he was giving you, how have you felt? Better than I have in months. The dizziness is gone. The confusion is gone. My mind is clear. I looked directly at the judge. I know what my son did. I know why he did it, and I know I'm only alive because a stranger cared more about my safety than my own child did. Brenner's cross-examination was aggressive, but I'd been prepared. He tried to poke holes in my memory, suggest confusion, imply I was mistaken. I answered every question calmly, precisely, without wavering. Mrs. Whitmore, isn't it true you've been prescribed temazepam in the past? Yes, briefly, after my husband died. So you had access to the drug found in your glass? I had a prescription 5 years ago. The bottle is still in my medicine cabinet, but it's been expired for years. I haven't taken it in over 4 years. Could you have accidentally taken some that night and forgotten? No. I was at a restaurant, I didn't bring my medications, and the amount in that glass was 10 times a therapeutic dose. That's not an accident. He tried another angle. You and your son had arguments about your living situation, correct? My son pressured me to sell my home and move into assisted living. I refused. Because you weren't thinking clearly about your own safety. Because I'm perfectly capable of living independently, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into giving up my home. That sounds rather hostile toward your own son. I looked at Marcus then. Really looked at him. His jaw was clenched, his hands flat on the table. He wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. I loved my son, I said quietly. I loved him his entire life. I gave him everything I could. And he repaid me by trying to kill me for my house and my money. If that sounds hostile, I think I've earned the right. The courtroom was silent. Then Catherine stood again. Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence. We've identified the person Marcus Whitmore was communicating with during his planning. A murmur went through the courtroom. Even Brenner looked surprised. This was apparently news to him too. We traced the burner phone records. The individual who was texting with the defendant, discussing timelines and methods, was his ex-wife, Jennifer Whitmore. My breath caught. Jennifer. Sweet Jennifer, who'd brought me wine and sympathy after the divorce. Jennifer who'd told me Marcus had been the one who didn't want children, making me feel sorry for her. Catherine pulled up the text messages on a screen for the court to see. Marcus. She's still refusing to move. We need to speed this up. Jennifer. What about increasing the dose? She's old. Heart attack would look natural. Marcus. Too risky. The restaurant plan is better. Public place, lots of confusion. I'll have an alibi. Jennifer. Make sure the amount is right. We can't screw this up again. Marcus. Don't worry, this time it'll work. Then we split everything 50-50 like we agreed. The dates on the messages were from 2 weeks before the dinner at Harvest Moon. Your Honor, Catherine said, Jennifer Whitmore was arrested this morning on conspiracy to commit murder charges. She's agreed to testify against the defendant in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's confirmed that she and Marcus Whitmore never actually divorced. They filed the papers but never finalized them. The divorce was staged so Mrs. Whitmore would let her guard down and trust Jennifer's concern. The plan was to kill Mrs. Whitmore, inherit her estate, and split the money. I felt like I'd been punched. The divorce had been fake. Jennifer's sympathy had been an act. They'd been planning this together for years, playing the long game, waiting for the right moment. Marcus's face had gone pale. He whispered urgently to Brenner, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The judge looked at the evidence, then at Marcus. her expression cold. "I've seen a lot of terrible things in this courtroom," she said. "But this level of premeditation, this callousness toward a parent who by all accounts loved and supported you, is among the worst. Mr. Whitmore, you are bound over for trial on charges of attempted murder, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. Bail remains denied." The gavel came down. Marcus finally looked at me. There was something in his eyes, maybe regret, maybe just anger at being caught, but it was too late. Whatever he'd been, whatever he might have been, was gone. They led him away in handcuffs. I watched him go and felt nothing. Not love, not hate. Just exhaustion and a strange kind of relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Catherine and a police officer shielded me as Helen hurried me to the car. But before we got there, I turned back. "I want to say something," I told Catherine. She nodded, and I stepped toward the microphones. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. What happened to me could happen to anyone. Our society doesn't always protect the elderly. We're seen as vulnerable, confused, disposable. But we're not. We have value. We have rights. We have voices." My own voice shook but didn't break. If someone you love is behaving strangely, if you're feeling sick without explanation, if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Speak up. Ask for help. A stranger saved my life because he paid attention and cared. We all need to pay attention. We all need to care. I stepped back and Helen guided me to the car. The trial was 4 months later. Jennifer testified, detailing the entire plan in exchange for 15 years instead of life. Marcus was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life. I attended every day of the trial. I wanted him to see me alive, clear-headed, stronger than he'd ever given me credit for. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel triumphant, just sad. Sad for the little boy who'd become this person. Sad for Robert, who never saw what his son had become. Sad for myself, for the family I'd thought I had. But I wasn't destroyed. That's what Marcus had never understood. He'd seen an elderly woman, easy prey. He'd never seen the strength that comes from 7 decades of life, from surviving loss, from teaching hundreds of children, from building a life with someone you loved. 1 year later, I'm still in my house. Helen moved into the guest room permanently. We joke that we're like the Golden Girls, but with better taste in furniture. The jacaranda tree bloomed again this spring, purple flowers carpeting the lawn, like they did when Robert was alive. I started volunteering at a senior advocacy center, speaking to groups about elder abuse, about staying vigilant, about knowing your rights. Jeremy Paulson came to one of my talks. He's in nursing school now, says that night changed what he wants to do with his life. The house will eventually go to charity when I die. I've made sure of that in a new will, drafted by lawyers Marcus will never touch. No family member will ever profit from my death. People ask me sometimes if I miss my son, if I wish I could forgive him. The truth is complicated. I miss the boy he was, or the boy I thought he was. I miss having a son to call on holidays, to share memories with. But the man who tried to kill me? I don't miss him at all. I'm 73 now. I take my medications, the right ones, monitored by my doctor and checked by Helen. I have coffee with friends. I tend Robert's garden. I watch the sunset from my porch, and every day I'm grateful. Grateful for observant waiters, grateful for thorough police work, grateful for a justice system that believed me, grateful for friends who stayed, grateful for another day in the home I love, living the life I chose. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, if you suspect someone is taking advantage of you or someone you love, please speak up, report it. You deserve to be safe, you deserve to be believed. And remember, surviving isn't just about staying alive. It's about refusing to let cruelty win. It's about choosing yourself, your safety, your future, even when it costs you everything you thought you had. I chose myself. I chose life. And every single day since that dinner at Harvest Moon, I've been grateful I did. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Someone out there might need to hear it. And if you have your own story of survival, of standing up, of refusing to be a victim, leave it in the comments. Let's create a community of strength, of people who refuse to give up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, you are stronger than anyone who tries to break you will ever understand.